In Tyumen, the corpses of dead animals are floating in the Tura River.
Dead fish are floating in the Tura. A cow and a roe deer were spotted. The water stinks so badly that in some parts of Tyumen, people cannot even wash their clothes.
Ryazan woke up on fire. Ukrainian drones hit one of Russia's biggest oil refineries and right beside it a Wildberries warehouse. The online giant caught quietly selling body armor and drone gear under the code phrase "everything for the SVO." Moscow won't call it a war, Ukraine just called the bluff.
Ryazan woke up on fire this morning. Ukrainian drones hit two targets that together sum up the war Russia refuses to name. The Ryazan oil refinery, a Rosneft plant that processes roughly 5% of the country's oil, and a Wildberries warehouse, part of the retail giant that had been quietly selling body armor and drone cable under the search term, "Everything for the Special Military Operation." Moscow's tidy acronym for a war it won't call one. A Ukrainian drone strike in Russia's Ryazan Oblast the morning of July 29th targeted a Wildberries warehouse and one of the country's biggest oil refineries, according to reports by eyewitnesses and open-source monitoring channels. The reports come amid a sustained Ukrainian strike campaign against the Russian e-commerce giant Wildberries, which has been hard hit by a string of consecutive attacks against its facilities over the past week. Ukraine targeted the city of Ryazan with a massive attack in the early hours of July 29th, according to regional governor Pavel Malkov. Ryazan is experiencing a massive drone attack and air defense systems are engaged. A fire has broken out on the territory of one of the enterprises, Malkov reported. Emergency services are at work at the attack scene, the governor said. Later, he updated his report to include fires in industrial areas and said that 6 people had been hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. Malkov did not specify which facilities had been hit. Local residents reported a series of explosions in the city and published photos and video footage online showing fires at multiple facilities. Locals said the Ryazan oil refinery and a Wildberries warehouse were both hit in the attack. The Ryazan oil refinery is one of the largest refineries in Russia. Owned by Rosneft, the plant produces upwards of 17.1 million tons of oil per year and accounts for roughly 5% of the country's total processing output. The facility has been a regular target of Ukraine's attacks on Russian oil infrastructure. A strike in May forced the Ryazan oil refinery to temporarily halt operations, contributing to a nationwide fuel crisis as Ukraine hammered refineries across Russia. Beginning in July, Ukraine began aiming its drones at a new target: Wildberries warehouses, which process millions of goods per day, including military equipment. Wildberries offers a number of dual-use items that can be used on the battlefield against Ukraine on its platform, including bulletproof vests and fiber-optic cable for drones. Following the July attacks, the company reportedly hid these goods from search results for the keywords "everything for the SVO" and SVO, the Russian acronym for Special Military Operation, the Kremlin's official euphemism for the all-out war in Ukraine. The company plays a significant role in Russia's consumer economy, accounting for almost 50% of Russia's online retail market. Wildberries has recently launched an advertising campaign urging Russians to support the platform's sellers in the wake of Ukraine's warehouse strikes. Billboards in occupied Crimea have begun featuring these messages, according to local Telegram channels. Following the reported attack on July 29th, Wildberries announced on its website that access to the Ryazan warehouse had been temporarily restricted. "We will provide further information when operations are restored," the company said. Wildberries are toast now. Clients are whining that the company refuses to give them back their goods and money.
Well, it seems Wildberries doesn't know how else to finish us off. And now, starting from the 24th, they've limited payouts to once a week. We can't even withdraw our own money whenever we want anymore. They've frozen our funds. I mean, we need that money to buy raw materials, which also come from America, right? That is both money and time. It is impossible for us to even do that. We are waiting.
There are certainly a lot of jokes.
In the city of Tyumen, another casualty of Putin's 26 years of hollowing out the country, A catastrophe is unfolding in a category the rest of the world closed the book on 2 centuries ago. The water supply has mixed with sewage and river water, and what comes out of the taps is no longer water at all but a contaminated sludge. The problem is not exotic or complicated. It is the kind of thing a functioning state solves once and forgets. Tumen has not been afforded a functioning state.
In Tumen, the corpses of dead animals are floating in the Tura River.
Dead fish are floating in the Tura. A cow and a roe deer were spotted. The water stinks so badly that in some parts of Tumen, people cannot even wash their clothes, because after washing, the clothes also stink. And today is our city day. Today there will be a celebratory fireworks display. Stars have been invited. There will be a celebratory cake, and 440 cups of tea will be handed out.
There is a moment in every long war when the fighting stops being decided at the front and starts being decided in the ledgers, and Russia is arriving at that moment now. The battlefield maps have barely moved, but the balance sheets are moving fast, and they are moving in one direction. After almost 4 years of full-scale war, the Russian economy is showing the kind of strain that does not announce itself with a single dramatic collapse, but accumulates quietly, line by line, until the arithmetic no longer works. The numbers coming out of 2025 and the first half of 2026 tell that story with unusual clarity. Start with the companies, because they are where a war economy either holds together or comes apart. Reported figures put the decline in profits among Russia's non-financial firms at around 6.8% over 2025, and the wider picture is worse than any single statistic suggests. By Ukrainian intelligence estimates that independent analysts have broadly echoed, 3/4 of Russia's largest companies ended 2025 with falling revenue, shrinking profit, or outright losses, and independent tracking found that 21 of the country's 28 biggest firms saw their position deteriorate over the year. Profit declines and growing losses now stretch across almost every sector except banking. The symbols of Russian corporate might are the ones flinching first. Gazprom, once the very emblem of Kremlin financial power, is set to withhold dividends from shareholders for a second straight year, having last paid out for the first half of 2022. Rusal and Alrosa, the giants of aluminum and diamonds, have done the same, and the largest steel producers have told shareholders to expect nothing for 2025. On the Moscow exchange, bond defaults have spiked from a handful in early 2025 to well over 100 in the first half of 2026, a sign that the debt holding the corporate sector together is starting to snap in places. When the people who profit most from a system begin moving their wealth out of it, they are voting with their capital, and Russia's billionaires are voting. Reporting drawn from people familiar with the investment decisions of several Russian oligarchs puts the sums that have quietly left the country in 2026, beyond the official figures, in the tens of billions of dollars, and describes the outflow as larger than the year before. The stated motive is fear, specifically the fear of asset confiscation, combined with the plain fact that a slowing economy no longer offers a good place to grow a fortune. Capital flight of this kind is both a symptom and an accelerant, draining the country of the investment it needs precisely when it needs it most. Underneath the corporate and elite distress sits a banking system quietly taking on the burden of the war. Years of crippling interest rates, held near 16% to fight wartime inflation, have made borrowing prohibitively expensive for households whose incomes have stagnated while food and service prices climb. The predictable result is a rise in bad debt. Reports point to non-performing consumer loans reaching as high as 15% at some major banks, a record level, and an EU intelligence assessment has warned of the risk of an explosive banking crisis as financial institutions shoulder more and more of the cost of keeping the war economy afloat. Banking has been one of the few sectors still posting profits, which makes the accumulation of bad loans there all the more significant. The single most important number is the one describing Russia's fiscal cushion. Before the war, the liquid portion of the National Wealth Fund, the reserve Moscow draws on to paper over deficits, stood at roughly 6.5% of GDP. By the spring of 2026, it had fallen to less than a third of that, in the neighborhood of the 1.5% now being cited. Oil and gas revenues, historically the source of more than 40% of the government's money, dropped sharply as prices fell and Ukrainian strikes disrupted refining. And the shortfall has been met by drawing down reserves, raising taxes on consumers, and taking on more debt. Each of those is a way of buying time, and each has a limit. This is the heart of the matter. Russia cannot mathematically sustain its current level of military spending indefinitely because the resources that spending consumes are finite and are being consumed faster than they are being replaced. Reserves fall, profits shrink, capital flees, and bad loans mount, and no amount of battlefield determination changes the underlying subtraction. Moscow has proven adept at managing decline, shifting from reserves toward debt, from energy revenue toward taxation, and calling the whole exercise stability. But managed decline is still decline, and the tools for managing it are dwindling.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comments section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.